Welcome to the Abide Podcast. We are dealing with parenting. I'm excited.
Yeah, we've got parenting really figured out.
No. Actually, when I think about parenting, when I talk with people about parenting, I want to make this clear. This is not a drive-by guilting. This is not us trying to make you feel bad. So many parents already feel like they're struggling. They're not where they're supposed to be. So I'm just going to go ahead and just lay the foundation. We are not perfect parents.
I kind of feel like I get drove by sometimes and shot at as a parent. You know what I mean? I feel like I got this vehicle of parenting figured out, and then all of a sudden I hear these bangs, and I look, and there's holes all in the system that I thought I had figured out. But parenting's tough, dude.
Dude, listen, the time you think you got it figured out, it will humble you and realize I don't have it figured out. And so laying the groundwork of at your worst, if you're listening to this as a parent, at your worst, you've ruined nothing. We serve a God, we abide with a God who redeems and restores families. And I started out like I got this, and boy, I've been humbled as a parent. And so we're gonna have to get some help.
Yeah, kids will humble you.
Yeah.
And, sometimes, oftentimes they will bring you to the place where you have to find God's direction in this. And, unfortunately, this storm right here is not going to be the last storm we face either. Every time we go through a storm, we're thinking, oh man, this is awesome, I'm done. And then we look at the forecast and the radar showing another one coming over the hills. So we've got to get ready. That's why this is something that we call abide. You've got to stay in it. This is not a one and done. This is a lifestyle, guys. And we want you to, we just want to help you walk through this. But we've got somebody with us today that is got a little bit more experience in raising some girls than we do right now. Glenn Sellers is with us today. And Glenn is one of mine and Josh's dear friends. Glenn, he's a deacon here at my church, and he's become a great friend of mine. But Glenn, you've got some good stories. But tell everybody about who you are. What your deal is.
You couldn't find anybody else.
There you go.
Was that kind of where I got in this list?
You're top shelf, buddy.
We're hoping you brought the silver bullet, right? There's a silver bullet here.
There is no silver bullet. You were just talking just a minute ago. I was thinking as you were talking, I'm like, what would I say if what is the thing? Because you said at your worst, you're okay. Man, I would say just show up.
Yeah.
You just got to show up. But there's so many mistakes made. I don't feel worthy to even be talking about parenting. I'm a husband to a beautiful and great wife, but man, my daddy skills, I don't feel like were are honed to be anything near perfect. And
just so you know, we're listening and learning because you've got a different stage of life, so we're listening and learning.
I've
You've got more belt buckles than we do when it comes to this daddy thing.
Belt buckles.
You got a few of them, buddy.
Belt buckles come with bruises too, though. And there are so many failures, and some of those things we'll talk about today. And there's a few phrases that my kids use today that I've said throughout the years. And one of them is that I need a whole lot of grace, but I've got to be willing to give it, at that same rate, because most of the time we want to divvy it out in a teaspoon, but we want people to shovel it on us, So we'll kind of get into that. But I'm happy to be a girl dad.
No boys, huh?
No boys. I don't even know what I would do with boys as a dad, but.
A lot less than you would with a girl.
I promise you.
I promise.
Listen, I'm a girl daddy and I'm a boy pappy. So I got 2 grandbabies that are boys.
That's right.
And it's very different. Lord's blessed me in that.
Tell me about being a granddaddy or pappy. Is it pappy?
It's pappy.
Tell me about pappy.
I'm pappy. Let me tell you, man. You don't have enough parts on the podcast to get into that.
You grinned a little different.
It's different. Just had lunch with Olivia and Tripp just a little while ago, and I told her, I said, I know you love him, and I know you love him. You'd give your life for him. I said, but I love him in a different way. And I said, you don't even know what that feels like yet.
Yeah.
And neither one of you guys have gotten to experience that. But it's different.
And we don't want you to speak that on.
No, that's a long time from now.
Oh,
long
Lord,
time
yeah.
from now.
Yeah, you got a long way to go.
So you
before
got
get there.
seasons, right? There's seasons that you go through as a dad, and you know, when we talk about seasons in life, we was joking earlier, but you know, we as hunters and stuff like that, we prepare for different seasons, like hunting seasons. You got cold weather, hot weather, and stuff like that. I feel like instead of, you know, our natural 4 seasons, as the year goes on, there's like 18 seasons when it comes to raising girls. Seasons change quick when it comes to raising girls. You know, it could be hot, it could be cold, it could be, you know, everything's smooth sailing, and all of a sudden there's a storm over the horizon.
Could be laughing, could be crying.
At the
It happens
same
really
time.
fast.
What, you know, some seasons are clashing at the same time, and we're sitting here and like, I don't know what to do, you know. And from this point on, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna be like, I'm gonna call Glenn real quick.
That's right. That's
but
right.
Glenn, tell us about some seasons that you've gone through, and you know, to our listeners out there, how you was able to navigate through some of that stuff.
You know, as we talk about seasons and seasons that we went through and that I went through as a dad, the thing that I want to make sure is that mainly for dads out there to know, no matter which season that you're in, they're difficult, they're hard, and there's no manual. There's no rule book that says this is what you got to do. You know, new babies, new responsibilities. I remember with Laurel. You know, I mean, we're almost 30 years ago now.
How old are you girls?
They're 29 and Olivia is 26. Laurel's got a new 8-week-old, 7.5 weeks, and Olivia's got Trip, who just turned 1, and just both of them just perfect, you know, in every way. So going through that new baby responsibility, there's expectations that people have, you know, what are you going to do now? You know, and you don't know. You don't know what those answers are.
Yeah.
You're just trying to get it right. You know, what's the next move? What happens? You know, then you got toddlers. You know, Trip's just walking, you know, been walking about a month. You know, he's constantly learning. He's asking questions every day. Everything is about a learning process, you know. And you're asking yourself, what am I going to do? How am I going to answer all of these questions as they continue to get harder? You know, young boy, young girl, man, I don't even know how to even react as a dad today. You got to be feeling this. What about this? They're growing up in a social media world, okay? And excuse me for reading the notes, but listen, they're comparing their self, their expectation based on a filtered, perfect photo.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And this is what how we're saying whether or not we're measuring up or not.
And that's them as a kid, but also as a parent. I feel like we're judging ourselves by ourselves, our worst to their best filter.
Every time.
And so that's why I feel like in parenting, there's so many that live on social media so they feel like a failure.
It's a social comparison. And what you're comparing yourself to isn't even real.
But isn't that just how the enemy works, though? I mean, as a man of God, as somebody who's trying to live for the Lord, isn't that one of the most decisive tools that the enemy could use against our family and even against ourselves? Because, you know, going back to what you just said, it's not just an attack on our kids. It then begins to attack, and we question our tactics and our motives on how to even parent a kid. But, you know, there's a lot of stuff that we face. But going back to those seasons, you know, you got to be ready for them.
Well, you know, I remember the question I had was, and you got to be facing this today if you've got this age child, is when do you have a phone and when do you not have a phone?
Oh, man.
When do you allow social media? When do you not allow social media?
I'll never forget a guy, another father told me one time, I asked him that question, and he said, when you want their childhood to end.
That's good.
When you want their childhood to end, give them a phone. Give them social media, give them the internet. That's a tough one. Yeah. And there's not as we said a minute, there's not a silver bullet.
Yeah,
there's not but that's it. Boy, that's tough.
You know, the next season that I remember being so significant is teenage years, right? teenage years, the girls, they started to show an interest in the opposite sex.
Really?
Oh my goodness,
So that happens, huh?
it happens. Yeah, it happens.
Josh,
Yeah,
that happens, bud.
yeah.
This is a touchy subject for Josh because Josh doesn't want that to happen. I mean, he does, but he doesn't.
I've been guarding my daughter for so long from these snot-nosed brats. I've worked so hard to make it difficult for a snot-nosed brat to impress my daughter.
But the problem is that there's a guy out there that God has made specifically for Addie. Addie, if you're watching this, there's somebody out there for you, sweetheart.
And I can't wait to meet him.
Well, y'all have talked about seasons and deer seasons. I remember it almost felt like whenever they reached a certain age that it was like opening day.
Oh man!
On my daughter, it was like, because it was like from one day to the next.
You lose your little girl.
That became that they came calling. You know what I mean? And I wasn't ready. And that's
That's one of the things that, again, I feel like it snuck up on me as well, and that's why whatever age your daughter is right now, or your son, if you're listening, but this is geared towards daddies with daughters, I would say one of the number one things you can do is already prepare the conversations now, not when hormones are raging, not when they've got the butterflies for a boy. Start now having some healthy conversations.
You need to survey the territory right now. Every dad needs to stop and just look around and say, "Where's my kid at? Where am I at?" Because it's and I've said this to you. I've said this to you. Even if you feel like you've got some things under control, when those seasons start coming around, like when Reagan left to go to college, that thing crept up on me and jumped on me, and I couldn't get it away. And I thought I was ready, man. But you talking about going back to releasing the arrows, man, I did not want to let that arrow fly. But at the same time, that's what that arrow was created for. And talking to you when your daughters got married and stuff like that, I was like, how was it when they went to college? You was like, oh, it was tough. But when they got married, oh, that was really bad. I was like, thanks, Glenn.
Well, more season.
I don't know why that it's this way, but for me, when both of the girls went to school, I went through what felt like mourning.
Oh, dude.
And listen, my wife, she had a difficult time with it, but not as hard a time as I did, and I don't even know why. But
Same
it was
here. Andrea was like a trooper. I was like, "Are you not going to cry at all?" She's like, "Here's a tissue." I couldn't understand what you just said. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm dying over here."
She was much stronger than I was at that
that all
time. I'm
about?
telling you, I don't know, but I would look at her and I'd be like, "Are you not feeling the same thing that I'm feeling?" And she was. She didn't like it. Don't get me wrong, but it didn't. It literally affected me for a while, and it felt like mourning.
Absolutely.
And the weddings for both, it was the same way. I don't know that it was quite as bad because whenever I dropped them off at school, it was like they don't have anybody. It was,
that was so hard.
I'm abandoning them. But
That's terrible.
the other piece, it was hard. It was hard. But going back to them being interested in boys, the one piece of advice that I would have for dads out there that is, number one, do not ignore it, and do not put your fist down and say, there'll be no boys at my house. Because that creates a different environment.
It does, doesn't it?
That you don't want to have to deal with because you are holding back a force of nature.
Absolutely.
And listen, both of my girls were so respectful of me, so much more than I deserved. But they simply would do what I asked them to do. They were very obedient, very kind, they were pleasing, and both of them, even to this day, I have to be careful because what I ask of them, they would do.
You know, a struggle that I was thinking about as dads today, the culture we live in today, and we have to be careful how we approach this, is the fact that, we kind of use it as comical and saying it, but we're like, I don't want no snotty-nosed boy coming to my house and stuff like that. But at the same time, we've been praying for it. And I know Josh's heart's right there. And I know I'm just picking, but today we have to be careful about how we approach that with our kids and guys out there, because let me tell you something. If you push the guys away, we live in a day and a culture where the same sex will try to slip in.
Yeah.
And that's just the day that we're living in.
Yeah, it is.
We're living in a day and time to where if we don't encourage them, and that's how I'm telling you, that's a hard thing to juggle, especially when we're like, I don't want my little girl to leave me. I don't want my little girl to go to some other guy. But at the same time, God's created a guy for them.
Yeah.
That's right.
And if we don't do that healthy,
The enemy's a liar and deceiver, and
Liar and
he'll lie and deceive, and so almost I feel like as you're talking, there's this pain that's coming in my life. It's the train that's going to hit me. It's not if it hurts; it's how bad is it going to hurt.
that little light down there is not a little light. That's a train, and
it's
you're on the
coming down
tracks, bud.
But I want to ask so that you've said it. These are the seasons. So what do you do in this season that is out of your control? Because it controls the thoughts of like how you're dealing with this. But this season of dating's out of our control in some degree. So what can we control?
That's a great question, and the answer is it's not completely out of your control in my mind. The control piece is for a dad with daughters, right? That's the only thing I can speak to. And in a past podcast, one of you mentioned this, and it is so true. I remember whenever Laura was 16, 17 years old, that she told me, she said, Daddy, she said, I just want somebody like you.
It was probably me. If it was something good, I probably said it, Glenn.
Well, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Because think about it.
Absolutely.
If she is picking her mate
Strong.
based on what she knows is the recipe for a mate, then she's getting all of those pieces that she wants in him from you. Okay? Now, how happy are you going to be with the mate she picks if he turns out just like you?
Yeah.
He speaks to his wife just like you do. He treats his wife just like you do. Okay? All of those things. He loves his wife just like you do.
Are you preaching to us?
I'm talking to both of you.
I
right now.
appreciate it because I need it.
I kind of feel convicted over here.
But do you want to know that's where you just said there's some ownership we got to take. This thing is out of our control, meaning like the force of nature of love and all that. But there's some things we can control, and it's how we love.
That's exactly right. Who she picks is going to be very similar to who her daddy is.
The more reason why we got to make sure that we're living as godly men in the best way that we can.
That's exactly right. That's the control that you have.
Yeah.
You know, and I wrote this down right before the podcast started. You know, there's multiple times in the Bible where you would hear the question asked of whose God do you serve?
Oh, yeah.
And they always referred back to, I'm serving the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. And the reason that they did that is that those were men, patriarchs, and dads that gave the example. Sure. And they said, I serve that same God. You know what I mean?
That's good stuff.
So whenever your kids are asked, okay, let me tell you, whenever Trip or Lane, all right, because right now both of them are babies, down the road somewhere, whenever somebody says, Trip, whose God do you serve? I want him to say, I serve the God of TJ, my pappy, and my pappy's pappy, and his pappy.
That's good stuff.
That's what we're trying to build here as men. Is I want them to be able to look back and say, there's where the example came from.
Yep.
Right.
And that's what's happening with these girls.
My fear, though, is what when we started this podcast, is that there's the breakdown between the pulpit and the pew. The last thing I want is that one day they'd say, my preacher, the God of my preacher.
Yeah.
No, but as the man, we're called to be the pastor, the protector and provider. And so I love the way you just put that. Love it.
The house is where the pastor's got to start.
So you attend this church. You sit up under my preaching every week.
Sir.
Just to give you an example of what Josh is trying to say here, your wife shouldn't look to me as the spiritual leader in her home. You're supposed to be the spiritual leader at home, right? And,
Yes.
And you know, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but I guess what I'm saying is to reiterate what he's saying is the men in the home need to be the godly leaders. And, but, I think we're going to talk more about that later on, but it's so important that each man own up to what he's supposed to do and to know that there's some hard choices that have to be made in life. Now, when you're talking about kids dating, Glenn, and our teenagers dating, has there ever been a clash of knowing what's right and,
Yeah, let me give you a story, and I'll tell this, and it sheds a dim light. The story does on my wife, and it makes me look good, and it's just the opposite of that. Mm-hmm. But with girls, especially the mother and the girls, they've got a bond.
They do.
They're tight, right? And they're somewhat friends with each other. Okay,
and it's something we don't have it's something different.
Yeah, it's a different friendship.
I can't speak to boys, but I think that with boys, it's that way with the dads.
I think you're right.
You know what I mean? But with the girls, they share something that I wasn't able to share with them.
There's been a lot of times conversations being had, and they see me, and the door is closed. I'm like, what? I'm not in the club?
Yeah, and
you're not, bud.
No, I know. I realize quick.
and it was not meant disrespectful. It's just something that they've got.
Sure. Yeah,
you know?
They got a bond.
So I remember this particular situation, and my girls they both dated differently, right? Both of them dated 2 or 3 different guys, but Laurel, she kind of felt like she knew who she was going to marry from the beginning, and Olivia didn't, So, but still, both of them. They had 2 or 3 guys that they dated, but this particular situation was with Olivia, and I always wanted to meet these guys. I didn't ever let them go out of the house. Your podcast a week or so talking about giving them keys to the truck.
Yeah, no,
they didn't get the keys to the truck.
No.
They had to go through some driving tests ahead of time.
Learners, yeah,
and that happened at the house, right? So this particular young man, Olivia told me about him. She told me where he worked. Well, he had never seen me before in my life. So I showed up at the job, and was doing some shopping around, and I saw him, and I'm like, this can't be the guy. You know what I mean? Just be very honest, had a big old dip of tobacco in his mouth, and,
You're doing a little undercover work here.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, yeah.
I would encourage everybody to.
Private eye.
I love it.
And just not what I would want for her. You know what I mean? And again, like I said a minute ago, it's hard to it's hard to take a stance of you will not. So she said, Daddy, I just think he's great, And I said, I'm just not so sure. And then my wife is like, why don't we just let him come over? Okay, because they're together on this.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
They done ganged up on you.
Yeah. And I said, well, let's have them over for supper. So we had them over, and we're
Again, controlled environment. I like it.
That's right. So we're all at the table, and he's at one end, and I'm at the other. And I said, why don't you pray over the food?
I love it. I'm still in
All
that
right.
one.
So let me tell you something,
I'm
man.
still in that one.
This boy went to praying, and I mean, he prayed, and he was so eloquent. He was
really?
writing Shakespeare, bro.
Uh-oh.
You hear me?
Uh-oh.
And Penny's over here with her eyes closed, and she's nodding her head, and Olivia's nodding her head, and I'm looking at this guy over
You ain't feeling
the
the spirit,
table,
are
and
you?
I'm like, who is this jack at my table? Thinks he's
You ain't
fooling
feeling it.
somebody.
My
You
man.
know what I mean? So he finishes the prayer, and we start eating and everything. And the whole time, I know that this guy is a fraud.
You smell what he's stepping in.
Absolutely. And so he leaves after the evening's over, and I kind of voice my opinion. I'm like, I just don't think he's the guy. And Penny's like, hey, Olivia, we'll talk later. And she comes.
We don't want your unpopular opinion right now.
And she's like, listen, he's fine. He's, and giving me all of his attributes.
Dad, you are the fun police.
How did you feel right then, though? I mean, there's conflict, right?
There's a conflict because the truth is I'm wanting to say, you're not going to see him anymore.
Yeah.
I don't want you seeing him. I'm going to forbid you to see him. But
And your spidey senses are going off.
Yeah.
You know with everything in you, no, 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 no.
listen-
But again, out of the control, you know how do you handle this is real
well,
sensitive.
the only
You're a Christian at this. I mean,
Yes.
you're living for the Lord. And do you feel like the Lord, the Holy Spirit, you know, we talk about gifts of the Spirit, and, you know, we can talk about that in depth later, but there's a spirit called the spirit of discernment.
yes.
And in your words, what does discernment mean, Josh?
It's of the spirits, of knowing you walking in the spirit of the flesh.
But
you're able to walk in that.
when it comes to a boyfriend or a girlfriend or something like that, if you didn't, you know, a discerning spirit is something like, I don't know about this. Are you feeling something? The spirit is putting something in you and saying, I don't know if this is the right direction.
Your
Something's
spirit
off
agrees
here.
either with their spirit or disagrees with that spirit. Yeah,
Right.
for sure.
So in this season though, don't you feel like the Holy Spirit is probably saying something's not right, Glenn?
Yeah.
So you have that conflict, and you know that God is saying something's not right here. But at the same time, you got Mama Bear who gives you sugar that
yeah, something's not right, but I want to keep mama happy.
that's the
And my daughter.
when you boil it down, that is the deal, right? Am I willing to be the most unpopular guy in the house
And because
for an
you-
extended period of time
Your job is to guard.
and
you
blow
feel
this
like
thing up?
You feel like you need to guard right
That's
now.
right.
But
we said the quote a couple of weeks ago, but sometimes people say that, you know, you can't, your kids are, and you can say it with your wife, but they're not delicate like flowers. You don't handle them delicate like flowers. You handle them like a delicate hand grenade, okay?
Like a delicate bomb. That's
Yeah,
what I've heard.
you know, and that's sometimes we just have to, you know, just throw the bomb in there, even though we know that this is not. I mean, but
it's funny you're telling this story because I feel so good at the stage and season that I'm at. Yet to have to cross into this, but I feel like as you're telling this story, the great theologian Mike Tyson once said, "Everybody has a plan to get punched in the face."
everybody has a plan to get punched in the face.
And I feel like in this moment, it's that punch to the face that it's like, oh, you had a plan till
That's right. And listen, all of the things that were going off in my mind that's telling me this is not a good situation. Every single one of those things that I would bring up, there was a rebuttal of what that thing was, and that this is why that's not valid.
You're not looking at it the right way, or you're not, you know,
Yeah, and
you don't understand.
I don't know the outcome. I'm listening and learning because I have a feeling there's some guys right now that are going, oh, this is going to be a path.
There's some guys that's walking in this mud
it's,
now.
it's happening. And listen, again, I don't want it to seem like that Penny was doing anything wrong, okay? Because what she was trying to do is she's trying to make sure that Olivia is happy.
That's it. That's
Okay.
good.
And
That's so good.
and Olivia needs a friend, and she's got a lot of friends, but she ain't got but one daddy.
That's right. But at that point in time, happiness is not what I'm supposed to be providing.
That's so good.
That's good.
You know what I mean? What I'm supposed to be providing is leadership and counsel,
Protection.
protection, right? And I had the ability to do it, and I had the clout with her to be able to do it. And I think that's what scared Penny so bad, is because she knew as a dad, okay, that I had the clout. I had earned enough throughout the years to be able to say, let's stop it. And as bad as she would have hated it, and she would have hated it, she would have screamed and cried and all of the things that teenage girls do. She would have done those, but she still would have honored her daddy. And she still would have said, all right, I'll end it.
For every dad out there that's dealing with this right now, how important it is for them to understand that they're not always going to be the friend. They're not always going to be the most popular guy in the room.
You know, there's a in the corporate world, there's a saying, and that saying is, leadership is lonely.
That's right.
And it's because hard decisions will put you on an island by yourself.
Yes, it will.
And it's the same way whenever you're trying to raise teenage daughters. Leadership can be lonely. There's times where you are going to be by yourself
Yep.
in that
And I fear
situation.
there's some daddies that are trying to be the popular one.
Oh, yeah.
And you know what? You can take that route, but oftentimes the lonely spot is the right spot
Yep.
Absolutely.
in leadership.
Well,
One of the things that you was talking about, and going back to, they see you coming and they start closing the door. I remember Andrew Reagan was dating some kid, and this might happen with you too eventually, or if it hadn't already. But
Misery loves company.
Reagan's, I don't know, she's 13, 14, 15, I don't know. But Reagan had said something about a kiss. And I was like, she's not kissed nobody. That's my daughter. Nobody's kissed my daughter. And my wife's like, she kissed a guy. And I was just like, what? I said, when did this happen? It happened a couple months ago. I was like,
You ain't in the club.
what?
You are not in the club.
They have that bond, Glenn. And she told her mama the first day it happened and didn't tell me.
Same here.
It's happened with you and they hadn't told you yet, buddy.
Misery loves company.
Man, it stinks.
Yeah, same here. So to fast forward just a little bit in this particular situation, I didn't do what I was supposed to. I left the post unmanned. Right?
No.
And I joined the enemy.
Team Glenn.
Yeah.
And he's not saying Penny's the enemy. He just means
No, of course not.
Penny, we love you. Glenn's the
She
one
knows
talking all
that.
this junk about you.
She knows that.
But no, you felt like the right thing and there's a wrong thing, and you, to keep happy, you
The
did
easy
the
route,
opposite of
yeah.
what you thought as the guard or the protector. You leaned in.
That's exactly right. I did. And allowed the relationship to go on for it wasn't a long time, but it was long enough, and it was ugly. It got ugly quick, and it got so ugly until that Olivia would even start to hide some of the characteristics of that relationship, even from her mom, because he was just not a good person. He was not. It just wasn't good, right? And it was the total opposite of what she saw her dad do, for these years. And
Can I ask you a question?
yeah, of course.
Without going into too much detail, are there signs that us as dads should be looking for in maybe the characteristics of our daughter or something like if we see that they're in a relationship, you can't turn the dad thing off. Even when my daughter's in a relationship, I'm still watching her. Are there things that you would tell? What could you tell us as saying, there were things that changed,
Listen, man, I know it's easy to overcomplicate things, but you cannot hide from things that a boy would do, right? You cannot hide things that come across good, healthy, pure, and clean.
That's right.
Right? So if Olivia has seen me do something as simple as open the car door for my wife, right? And I see her in a situation that's 2 or 3 weeks old, and that boy's not opening the car door. I know it sounds simple, but Dad, pay attention to what is happening right there, because you know for her that she knows that's something that's important,
Yeah, that's right.
right? She knows.
And you valued her and cherished her, and if somebody else is not, you can tell.
That you can tell that it's not happening, right? And if it's not happening on those things that are that simple, okay, and to those dads out there, listen to me, those things are that important.
we should listen to the conversation, shouldn't we?
You should be listening and you should be watching what's going on, okay? Because both of the relationships that they're in now, right? Luke and Laurel's coming up, I think, on 7 years. You will not find that boy not open the car door.
That's right.
I don't care if it's raining outside. You've seen him, right? He's going to open the car door. Olivia and TJ, I don't care what the situation is. He's going to open the car door. He may be putting the baby in, and then he's going to go back around the car and open it's just because and we're talking about not just car doors. There's a list of those things.
That's just a good example.
That's just one
of
that
watching how he serves.
that's one that I'm pulling out, right? And then watch her too, okay? Because those things that they have seen Penny do as well. Watch if she's doing those.
Sure.
Okay, because everything's reciprocated in those kind of relationships, and there's signs, and you'll pick up on them, and it's things that don't happen that should be happening, and they happen in your home. You see them, you know what they are, but they're not happening
But
in
you know,
that relationship.
we as deer hunters, we don't just go out in the woods and sit in a stand or something like that. What are we taking in consideration? We're looking for signs, right?
Oh yeah. And used it as an example, but the spidey senses, man, you know when something's right and something, or even when something's off with your daughter. You know when something's off, and if he's consistently around and she's off, them spidey senses better be going off.
This is not I don't think this is a season that we should be passive.
Oh man,
Oh no, it should be just the opposite.
We should be attentive.
very engaged.
And I like what you did, slipping into where you worked and stuff like that. And it might seem comical to some guys, but can I tell you something? I think it's your job. Everybody wants their space. Don't get in my business. I think we need to create standards with our kids to let them know, listen, your business is my business until, there's no boundaries on where I'm not going to go.
That's exactly right.
If that makes sense. Yeah. Is there anything in Addie's life that she doesn't know that you're willing to go into if you need to?
And the thing that, even as you're telling this story, I'm putting myself in your shoes, and I'm realizing it would be easy to punt that position of protector away and just go, this will be happy and easier in life. But again, going back to you're seeing and knowing this is not right.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know, so how did you press in? How did you engage?
Well, unfortunately, almost having just to clean up the train wreck at the end, and that's one of the times that I failed my daughter, just because it ended poorly, and not to go into the details, but I can look back now, and Penny will look back now and say, that day at the dinner table, whenever I knew it wasn't right, okay, I could have ended all of that, and none of these things would have happened.
And the thought as a dad that you can save your daughter so much pain, the Spirit, praying over them, the Spirit leading and guiding, but there will have to be in the now conversations that go, if you trust me, I'm praying for you now.
That's right.
There's one thing that I think, and listen, I love my upbringing, and I'm thankful for it. And there were a lot of things that I didn't like about how my mom and dad did at the time. But do you remember your parents telling you no to something, and you would be like, why? And they would just be like, because I said so.
Because I said so.
We didn't understand that. I remember there would be people who invite me over to the house. I'd want to go hang out with them. My mom and dad would be like, no, you're not going over there.
Yeah.
I'm like, why?
Yeah.
And they would be like, because I said so.
Yeah.
And I would a lot of times it was when I wanted to hang out with you. My mom and dad was like, no, you're not going to hang out with him.
But in this story, in this situation right now, it makes me realize, it's true though.
It's true.
It makes me realize I want to now begin to tell my daughter, I want you to know I'm praying right now for you.
Yeah.
And as I'm praying for you now, there may be a day that I feel led in something that you don't. Let's have that conversation. Let me at least explain what I'm feeling, what I'm seeing. And again, you even bring him to the house for a meal. That's one of the ways. It's a level of courting, right? Like come hang out, fire up the grill. We'll hang out right here. That starts in a conversation of, do you trust that we've got you to this place and that we have done our best and looked out for you? We're still looking out for you. Let us be a part of this process.
Yeah, the times that we went through those same steps we're only talking about a couple of guys, right? Mm-hmm. The times we went through that same steps with our girls, it was good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It wasn't bad situations like that one, and I didn't have red flags going off in these others. No, that wasn't the boy they were supposed to be with.
Sure.
You know what I mean? But it wasn't that way.
So I'm curious though, that the older they get, has there been times you've had to be the bad guy in a season where it's like, hey, I think I know what's best? Because surely it's not just in the dating season.
No, it's not. So I'm gonna give you an example. This one is for Laurel, and of course you know Luke. He's your worship pastor, right? So they were. I can't even remember the ages, but both of them. Of course, Laurel was driving, and this
So they're dating. Right?
They're dating. Yep. They're serious, and this is in the wintertime. And Laurel's room was upstairs, and I remember that it was Luke's birthday.
Okay.
All right. So the weather wasn't good that day. And I remember Laurel saying, Daddy, she said, I'm going to go to Luke's. We're going to so-and-so. We're going to celebrate Luke's birthday. Well, her driving to Greenville, it sounds old-fashioned, but her driving to Greenville was a big deal for me anyway, right? We live in Anderson. She's going to drive, 45 minutes away. And I said, well, let's see what the weather's going to do. And she said, no, Daddy, it's going to be fine, And I said, well, let's check out the weather, And she, throughout the morning, she's, Daddy, what do you think? What do you think? I said, here's what we're going to do. I said, you tell me, you check out the weather, okay? And you let me know, based on what the weather forecast is going to be, because they were calling for snow and ice, right? You let me know what you think the weather's going to do, and let me know what your decision is, okay? And I went back downstairs. She said, that's great, right? I went back downstairs, and my wife is like, you're not letting her go, are you? And I'm like, let's see what she decides to do. And so 3 or 4 hours pass, and she's got her shower, and she's upstairs, and
She ain't looked at the weather, has she?
I'm watching the weather forecast, and what do y'all think the weather's doing at this point? It's deteriorating, right? So I call up to her, and I'm like, Laurel, I said, have you seen the weather? She said, yeah. I said, what are you going to do? She said, I'm going to be leaving here in about 30 minutes. And she said, we're going to celebrate his birthday. It's going to be fine. So I said, you're not going to be able to go, right? And you talk about war was breaking out upstairs.
It's like you killed somebody in the house.
I mean, you would have thought that, Daddy, you don't understand. You told me.
You're the fun police.
You've got to let me make my own decisions. And you said, you decide what you think's best. And I said, I did. And she said, well, how do you explain that? And I said, well, if you would have made the right decision, I would have let that happen. But you didn't. So I've got to step in. Now, if you've been around either of my kids very long, you've probably heard that statement, which is, as long as you make the right decision, Daddy's okay with it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because they bring it up even today, all right? And I said, you can't go, Now, here's the beauty behind that, all right? And you gotta not play those cards incorrectly. I didn't tell her she couldn't go because I didn't want her to go. I told her she couldn't go because it was in her best interest not to go.
Sure.
And then the weather turned bad, and 3 or 4 hours later, it was terrible, right? She would have been stranded. She wouldn't have been able to get home. And I said, did you see what the weather did? And she still wasn't happy, don't get me wrong. And the way she answered it wasn't great. And that's okay. I'm thick-skinned. But, she's like, yeah, I saw it,
What Luke should have done is Luke should have been like, I'm coming to Glenn's house hoping the weather gets bad and I get snowed in.
That was the way me and you thought.
That's what we thought.
There was something going on that he wasn't able to come because he'd made the trip to our house the majority of the time.
But even if he didn't do it just out of a gentleman's rule, he should have done it thinking, the weather's getting bad. I better hurry up and get to Glenn's.
That's exactly right. But to the dads out there and to y'all, let me tell you the beauty. You ready? Here's the beauty. Throughout their relationship, throughout Olivia's relationships, not even dealing with dating, right? Decisions are coming up just like wildfire for them to start making decisions at this age. Anybody that's listening, you're understanding that they are going to be faced with decision after decision after decision, and a lot of those you're going to be able to be involved in. And whenever they make good ones,
Yeah.
and you let those good ones happen, and you let them see what comes to fruition from that good decision, it gives them confidence. Even today, okay, with as mothers, even today, whenever they make a decision that they involve me in, and I say, I think that's a great idea. You talk about confident because they know, even today at the ages they are now, that if I say, I don't think that's a good idea, they go back to those times just like this and they say, Daddy wouldn't do it just because. He would only do it if he knew it was for my own good. And it allows them the trust of being able to make the right decision because guess what? Today, they really don't make them. That's wrong. That track record has proven itself over those times where I've said, I think it's a good idea. Or I just really don't think that's the right thing to do. They've learned to trust that over these kind of situations here and knowing that, even if it's unpopular, you got to make that decision.
You're using a car and weather, but oftentimes, I had a sister, so I remember the conversations, the outfit that you're wearing, the hanging out with these people. Like at some point, there has to be this truth of my job is to protect. And so I may be the bad guy here, but you punted it one time and you said, I'm not punting it again.
That's exactly right.
I think you got to keep that line of communication open, though. You've got to let, and that's where we have to be intentional about this. We have to make the investment that sometimes, we have to put forth the effort in making sure that our kids know that their opinion is matters to us. You said if they say something and get it right, we need to, I always think of it like this. There's people that have criticized me over my life, and that's fine. You want to give me criticism, that's great. But it means a lot to me when the ones who are criticizing me are also the ones who are applauding me if I do something good. Does that make sense?
I've told the girls over and over, and this is kind of the way I explain it, and that is, I have never that I know of intentionally, right? And that doesn't mean that there's any I can even think of. I've never made a decision for them that was self-serving. Everything was always to serve them better, right? And as long as every decision that you help them make, right, is Addison serving, it doesn't take long for that to feel good to them because they know if Daddy tells me no, it's not for his benefit.
That's right.
You will get nothing good from it. And I reminded them of that so many times that you've got to earn the trust, and that trust is that you never burn one decision for you. Never, ever compromise and say, it would be easier for me.
That's right.
I know it's okay, but I'm still going to make the decision to serve me better.
Sure.
Never burn one of those. And they trust that I wouldn't.
And you know what? And you being in that spiritual role, the spiritual leader, that is the importance of some guys that maybe they're not walking in that role like they're supposed to, but if you ever realize the weight of that role, all of a sudden every decision is in the reflection of abiding in him, knowing that everything he's ever done, it's been honoring to the Father. And he's going, I'm doing what's best for you, even if it doesn't look that way, even if it doesn't feel that way. I promise you, this pain, it's tough, but I got you. Like
That's exactly right.
And so we see that in the Father, and if they see that we're following him, they see us in a spiritual role. What's the importance of that role as a spiritual father?
Well, I mean, that's the key. Because I wasn't always. There was times in my life that I wasn't even serving him at all. I was lost, and
There's guys that might be watching right now that might not be in that place, Glenn.
yeah. And listen, it's hard to be a dad, and it's hard to give guidance whenever you have no guidance. So that probably brings me to a point in time where as as my kids were younger, and we're talking about times that happened whenever I was a believer, and gave up the role.
Yeah.
Then there's other times where I had never even took the role.
Yeah.
And my wife and kids were needing that guidance and leadership, and they're getting it somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that is a tough place to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you shared a little bit beforehand the Deuteronomy 6 that you're talking about the works to encourage. This was the role that God called us to.
That's right.
The Deuteronomy 6. I'd love for you to read that.
Yeah, so it says, "And these words I command you today shall be on your heart." Now this is Moses talking about what you have to do in order to lead your kids. Listen to this. He says, "You shall teach them diligently to your children." And he's talking about the ways of our Father, right? Mm-hmm. "You shall talk to them when you sit in your house and when you walk by the way." So when you're sitting with them in the house, when you're taking walks with them, and when you lie down, so you talk about it whenever you're going to sleep. He says, "And when you rise," so you talk about it when you get up. "You shall bind them as a sign in your hand." You take these rules of serving him that strong. He said, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You know what frontlets are? If you ever seen these pictures where they've got these beads around their head and they've got these things that dangle between their eyes. He's saying, I want it to be so important that it's dangling right here between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house. Write down how important it is to serve him with all your heart and all your might. He said, and I even want you to write it on the gates. Whenever you come into the property, I want people to know from the gate how important it is that we serve him.
What I'm getting out of that is that there cannot be no question on what we believe, on
None.
what you believe.
That's exactly right.
And who's that up to? Is it up to the kids to put it on the doorpost? Is it up to the kids to put it on the gates? Who's taking care of that?
That's Daddy's job.
That's Daddy's job.
And there might be a dad that goes, "Listen, I'm not where you are spiritually. I don't have what it takes." And you read it. I highlighted a couple of things just now when you're reading it. If there's a daddy right now that says, "I don't think I have what it takes," well, look where he says to diligently teach. If you're a dad, do you sit with your kids? Do you sit at the house? Do you walk with them? Obviously now riding. For me, one of the greatest times that I had with my daughter and my son is in the car. By the way, if you're a parent listening, you have every resource that he gave.
That's right.
The last thing we've got to stop doing as parents, and this is a little bit of my soapbox, stop punting the device to them in that moment. That's the time that you go, let's talk. That's when that trust of, hey, I was praying for you today and thinking about this, like those are when you have those conversations. And I fear that some of these, as you walk or as you ride, in the car for us nowadays, we got to stop punting the device to them, turn on the TV and whatever, have that conversation, because he says diligently teaches your children. That's work. That's work.
And the day we living in, and here's the thing that we can't push aside is the fact that whether we realize it or not, our kids are going through so much, and they've got real good at camouflaging it.
Oh yeah.
And if you start pulling layers back by just open up in a conversation and talking to your kids, you'll find out that they're facing stuff that you had no idea.
And I think it's crazy. Thousands of years ago, he said, "I got a plan for you," and it still works. One of the greatest psychologists say the greatest time a family has is at a meal. That's the greatest, most valuable time you have is around a meal. And I'm telling you again, it's my little soapbox, but I get sick when I watch they've punted that to a device.
Yes.
Kids are facing a device, and this is the time that you diligently talk. And it doesn't mean it's a sermon. It's, hey, how's your day?
Yep.
And as you're walking and talking, somehow, some way, slip in the diligent teaching of, hey, God was in this situation right here.
That's so true.
And so I felt led as you're reading it just now. If there's somebody that goes, yeah, that's good for you, I don't have that. No, you have every resource. You have a house that you go to bed with, you walk with them, you ride with them, you wake up and ride. Like, you have every resource. It's just, are you passive in it?
You got to do it.
One of the things that I think guys are going to struggle with right now is like, okay, so we're trying to implement things in our life to be better. I'm trying to do it. You're trying to do it. we're talking to dads right now, and we're saying, okay, do what Moses just said. You know, start talking to your kids. Here's what some guys are going to deal with. They're going to try to start talking to their kids, and they're immediately going to get resistance. You want to know why? Because their kids are smart, and their kids have not seen this side of you yet. And these kids are like, I don't, you know, we're going to have to put forth the investment in the time. And even though we might, you know, tee it up, it might get knocked over a time or two. But we've got to be persistent in this because it's our job to get in these kids' life. It's our job. Your daughter, whether you realize it or not, wants to talk to you.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm going to tell you something. There's some guys that have not earned that yet because their attention has been over here, their attention has been over there, and your kid has come and tried to talk to you before. You know what you did? You punted it, or you did this, or you did that, and now you're trying to fit yourself into a role that you have never been in before, and now your kids are looking at you and be like, well, why should I trust you with this? There's going to have to come some consistency in your life, and there's going to have to be men that have to say, I've done it, that you have to say, okay, I'm gonna stay at this. And I'm going to prove to them, and I want them to know that, you know, because I guarantee you, there's not a man that's listening that has a daughter that deep down your daughter don't want to talk to you. Hey guys, thank you for checking us out on this. We're still parenting kids. We're going to have to break this one up because there's so much good content with Brother Glenn. So we're going to have another episode, which is episode 4. So make sure you check that out. Like, subscribe, do all that kind of stuff. There's a bunch of buttons they need to press, right?
Push them all.
Push all the buttons. We love you. Thumbs up. We'll catch you on the next one.